We are really privileged to be able to look at two very early works by Preller, one from 1947, the other from 1948. Behind me you will see an early small work which is a preparatory piece for a much larger Christ head. What's interesting about this small work is that it has been produced in a style that relates to the period where he was casting small slabs of plaster Paris in cigarette boxes, covering them with varnish and then painting, but scratching through to the white plasterwork. And in this Christ head you see the same almost sgraffito-like quality. Preller was making those small paintings because he was living on the whiff of an oil rag, and he was able to sell these small work for a guinea or two, which enabled him to eat while he was working on the larger pieces. It is quite a dramatic work. It has this large head which looks almost like as though it's turbaned. In the shape of the head there are allusions to Bruegel's famous portraits with these big turbans. In contrast to this work, when we look at the Homage to Hieronymus Bosch, painted in 1948, we see his strong interest in the work of Hieronymus Bosch and the almost surrealist-like qualities of the piece. Preller visited Paris during this period, and he collected a beautiful book on Hieronymus Bosch. And this became the source for a number of paintings. There is the famous work Symbols on a Beach, which was produced in the year after this and was related to his time in the Seychelles. One has a rather strange central image which comes from Hieronymus Bosch with this tree, this bowl, this flying fish, a figure impaled on a tree, a falling figure, and then a small owl at the top. It's an enigmatic image with this head which sits in this bowl, and again looks quite Florentine, the head, with this headgear. You will see that there are a series of quotations, this almost drunken fish in this foreground, a flipped up underview of a ray, a peasant woman holding her child, and then in the background this group of figures below a table and a flying fish. So many of these come from the Hieronymus Bosch triptych to St. Anthony. Interestingly enough, when he went to study in London, went to study theatre, not painting. And you can see the theatrical quality in this work, where the two books really become stage-like, and one has this dramatic theatrical lighting. One sees how he pinpoints particular figures through the lighting, and one sees this extraordinary little hand coming out from behind the red cloth. He's creating this series of quotations which in the end really look almost like a pop-up book. So it has this magical quality to it, but at the same time it is a disturbing work. So it sits in the kind of genre of surrealism, but most probably more closely related to the Italian metaphysical painters like de Chirico. What is interesting in Preller's work is that there are themes that repeat themselves in a kind of fugue-like manner throughout his life. And one will see this importance of a singular head in the Christ head, or in the center of this Homage to Hieronymus Bosch. This head sits within the bowl. Here we have a portrait of the poet Poliziano, who worked with Lorenzo de' Medici in Florence and was one of the great humanist poets. This is part of a pair of works which were shown on his last exhibition at Goodman Gallery in 1975. These works have this jewel-like quality. In fact, the one above it comes from the same exhibition with this very beautiful conus shell. One can see within this work that there are allusions to these cracks in the face which come from some of his very, very early paintings, which there were allusions to polychrome sculpture that were cracked or otherwise to icons. And you can see the kind of iconic quality in the piece, where it has this direct gaze and kind of power in the stylized nature of the image itself. And he has this beautiful red little hat on, which is related to some of the Florentine portraiture of the time. We see also this kind of hat being used all along the east coast of Africa. One sees them in Zanzibar and Lamu, and there is something distinctly almost Arabic in the eyes as well. So it sits in a very fluid way between cultures, and has this very precise beard with these shiny little bells attached, which looks almost like the pharaonic beards, and those appear often in his work, as do these floating aquamarine-like eggs which hover in front of the field, and then the very spiky details which at times seem very precise, or these florid elements which tuck in behind the form. We see those conventions here within the portrait, but we also see them within this painting of the shell, which is entitled Undeciphered Message. And here Preller is painting a Kona shell, one that he most probably collected in the Seychelles many years before, and they have these very beautiful, almost Morse code-like patterns on them. And so he's alluding here to a kind of hidden language within nature itself. And you see the sun in this aquamarine sky in the background, and these palm-like fronds which come out from the right-hand side of the shell, with the small twigs or branches on which dates or small fruit are normally attached. He uses the shell much earlier in his career in the hieratic figures, where he simplifies the human body into this cone shape. That becomes a theme or an image which moves through a large number of his works, and so it's fascinating to see it reappear as the shell again right in the last exhibition. It hung alongside another shell-like work which was called The Tower, which related it to the Tower of Babel. So the other shell painting has a spiral which comes out of the top. So there are these kind of allusions to the mythological in the natural world. And so Preller was a real master at conjuring this metaphysical, metaphorical, symbolic world in which he lived and created.